why isn't AI really penetrating the enterprise?
Most companies didn't embrace it very readily. It took them a long time.
AI, in theory, is empowering new kinds of companies to actually exist.
Hello and welcome back to Call Me Data. I'm David Gleason from All In on Data, and I'm joined as usual by my co-founder and colleague, Peter Memon.
Thanks, David. Thank you for the introduction. And we have a great session today, welcoming Oren Michels, the CEO of BarnDoor.AI, a very interesting agentic AI company that I'm sure we're going to have a fascinating discussion. Former CEO of Mastery, and also my personal favorite, former CEO of WineBid. So I think with that, and Oren as well is also a current Broadway producer, right?
I am, yes.
Yes, a fascinating background. So I'm sure we're going to have a interesting discussion today. So I look forward, Oren, to learning as much as possible about BarnDoor and everything else we can possibly chat about.
It's so much fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah. So to you, I certainly want to hear more about yourself and BarnDoor and some of the things that you're working on.
Yeah, it's history tends to repeat itself. Back in 2006, I noticed that there were these things called APIs, and I wanted to use them to help companies grow, to interact with other companies and sort of build bigger things. And what I found was that most companies that were using them, it was kind of tied up in the data center. You had to find the dude who knew the password to the router to open something. And it was not really something that I as a business person could use. So I started a company called Mastery, and we sort of created the sector of API management as a service, ran that for 7 years and sold it to Intel. And during that period of time, you watched APIs become this sort of very mainstream thing that now is very much a part of the tech stack of most technology companies. And then a couple of years ago, we're starting to hear a lot about AI and AI in the enterprise. And there was a lot of conversation about why isn't AI really penetrating the enterprise? What are we missing? And it seemed like what I had seen before, which was that a lot of it was tied up in the tech world. So you had this chat interface that was the primary way people would use it. And you would use this chat interface to chat with a PhD brain, artificial intelligence. And the people who spent their lives doing that mostly were people who wrote code. Your code doesn't work. You go to your PhD CTO and say, hey, fix my code.
Right.
And now you have a machine do it. Great. The rest of us in the company, that's not how we do our jobs. My marketing person does not chat with PhDs all day long for suggestions on what she should do. So it seemed like we needed a way, once again, to bring the connectivity out of the sort of the back office, the data center, and bring that as something that humans could use with AI to actually accomplish things that, using the tools that they use, using Salesforce, using Box, using all these different tools. And so we started BarnDoor to make that a reality.
Really interesting. I think one of the things that's interesting to me too is that you were around for the API era and you saw some challenges and problems there, and you started a company to try to address those.
Yeah.
It has always stuck with me that APIs in the late 2000s, there were a lot of articles about how every business leader needed to understand the API era and what was going to happen. And in a lot of ways, that never really happened.
No.
It didn't come to fruition. No. APIs were very useful, still are very useful. They're a fundamental piece of technical architecture, but they're really viewed as a technology component today.
Yes.
They never really penetrated the business psyche.
Yeah, I think it's true. And part of it was there was a part of the hype cycle for APIs where the idea was you open an API and this army of hundreds of thousands of developers out there would build things on your thing, right? And that was all the rage. And we had this huge developer network. We had 250,000 developers that were signed up. It was great. And that happens sometimes. But really the value was large company X has APIs, large company Y, they do a partnership together. They're able to, you have Citibank, you walk into a Best Buy, you use your Citibank reward card and you walk out with a TV set, right? The behind the scenes of that was where APIs were really making money.
Right.
And so the hype of it, we used to have this conference and we have to sort of explain to people what APIs were and how do you spell it. I mean, it really was tough. Fortunately, AI, at least people mostly think they know what it is. Right. And there's still a lot of figuring out what to do with it. You're at the point now where you sort of see human processes and you are automating those. That's lovely, but that's not really where the value is going to be created.
Right.
The value is created by doing things humans can't do, not just having, faster horses.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's interesting too, because you said earlier jokingly that, the difference between APIs and AI is that you took a P away.
Exactly.
I do think, to your point, there's a lot of potential for AI in a way that maybe will surpass where APIs are going.
I certainly hope so.
Agentic is certainly the thing that's getting us excited about that conversation. Like, what do you see as being different this time with AI?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of money behind it, right? And there is so with APIs, it was, you had, they're also called web services, right? It was sort of extending the internet, extending the web to make it do a few more things.
Right.
Lovely, but not necessarily earth-shattering. AI, in theory, is empowering new kinds of companies to actually exist. That you have these, you have companies where you can start a company and have, a dozen people and still, really well if you really leverage it. So it permeates all parts of the business. I wouldn't necessarily go to the head of marketing at some Fortune 500 company and say, you need an API. But I certainly would go to them and say, there's some stuff that agentic AI can do that will really radically change your company.
Right.
Right. So you bring up, I think, a great point. I think one David and I have spoken about at length, especially with AI. You're really focusing more on the business than ever before.
Absolutely.
And I think the sales cycle with that changes quite dramatically. You're not selling into tech.
No.
And I think him and I, we argue, I think, quite often that that's the wrong place to wind up.
Well, we weren't really selling into tech in the API world either. It was kind of a weird thing. With the API world, we were fortunate that we started the company, and about 3 months later, the iPhone came out, and the App Store came out, and suddenly every company needed a mobile strategy.
Right.
And those apps had to talk to something, and those things, they didn't know it at the time, but those things were called APIs.
Right.
Right. So that was what actually fueled our growth. So it was fairly broad in that sense. But yeah, the AI thing is definitely, that with many more zeros.
Right.
There's a really interesting distinction too that you raised, which is APIs. If I can paraphrase, APIs were about connecting companies more easily, but they weren't really creating new capabilities inside those companies they didn't have.
Not much,
just
no.
exposing the capabilities of their existing applications
And giving you new lenses to use it.
Right.
A great mobile application is not a shrunken website. It's a thing that does a purpose. We always said at Mastery, a great app grants a wish. Which is different than a great website, which lets you do everything.
Right.
And AIs, by contrast, or an AI solution can create new capability, new operating models, new business models that didn't exist before.
Right, exactly. And that's the goal of this, right? And that's what we're trying to figure out now as an entire industry, which is, what are those new capabilities? And so we have this protocol MCP. I don't know if you talked about it before on your show, but it's a great way for different kinds of AIs to access different kinds of tools that you might use, Salesforce, whatever the tools are you're using. Now, and that protocol is about a year old.
Right.
And so it's maybe 6-8 months since everyone actually started using it.
Mm-hmm.
So in that period of time, we're now seeing little test use cases and people doing some fun, interesting things, but you still haven't yet seen a lot of foundational new things happening in companies that didn't happen before. You kind of have to have the ability to trust AI and trust the people using AI to use these capabilities before they're going to start really saying, gosh, I have this problem and these things, and I've got this new thing, and I'm going to do that thing over there that nobody thought of. We're still waiting for that.
Right. It's funny. I'm sorry. When we initially started using MCP, and when I even started developing some of these agents, to me they were, I'll use the term, glorified APIs to a large degree.
Glorified RPA, yeah.
Right, exactly. I think that's a lot of what we're seeing right now, that it hasn't moved up the food chain yet.
No.
And as people, I think, are still grappling with, what can it actually do?
Well,
and what is this, in fact, what is MCP? What is all this stuff?
And a lot of the challenge to that is that because people are still kind of wary about what can go wrong with it, the MCP servers that are being put out there, a lot of them are read-only.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, we've seen
so you have essentially what you're getting is glorified automated reporting. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Lovely, but
nice.
again, not life-changing. We have automated reporting already, right? And so from our standpoint, the only way this really takes off is if you actually start letting the AI write, letting it do things.
Right,
If,
agree.
if it doesn't write, it is not agentic, right? And so in that sense, what these models are doing right now is they're suggesting actions that humans should take. It's like you put this stuff in and you get information, and the human is, the AI suggests you do something.
Right.
Until the AI does it, it's not all that interesting. But you have to trust that it's not going to screw up.
I think you just summarized agentic in the best way I've ever heard, which is if it doesn't write,
it ain't
it's
agentic.
not agentic. And I think that's a great way of
Yeah.
condensing it. And you're right. Like, agents today are usually read-only.
Right.
And it comes back to, and I think this probably is part of what you saw when you created BarnDoor, the most incredibly exciting and at the same time terrifying aspect of MCP is that idea of dynamic tool selection and deciding on the fly how to use a tool.
Yes.
And that unlocks all the power, but it also makes you stay up at night worrying about what it could do if it had
absolutely. And so the way you manage this, like currently a lot of people do it with identity. Oren is allowed to do X, therefore Oren's AI can do X. But Oren has governance inside of him that the AI does not, right? I have experience. I know that, deleting opportunities in Salesforce is stupid. I shouldn't do that. And I probably would get fired if I went and did it. And these agents don't have that level of governance. So the identity, while it's important, it certainly shouldn't do things that I'm not allowed to do, but it can't do everything I am allowed to do. And that's where the identity thing sort of starts falling apart.
That's a really interesting point, because now 7 or 8 years ago, maybe a little bit longer even, when I was at a very large bank, we came up with, and this was certainly not a unique idea, but we agreed that the way to govern AI models, and obviously this was pre-agentic, was to basically treat them like employees and to give them the same sort of policies and guardrails that you'd give an employee. And that worked for a while because we were dealing with, somewhat deterministic models that weren't doing crazy unpredictable things. But you raise a really interesting point, which is, and I know a lot of us, including you, have used the analogy of an agent as an intern. That intern lacks the common sense, the wisdom, the discretion.
They're so enthusiastic.
Yes, they are. Don't want to do too much. What was the agent recently, the Google agent that actually deleted somebody's hard drive?
I saw that.
Overly enthusiastic. It wiped everything out.
But apologized very nicely.
Oh, was very nice about it and said, how do you actually fix the problem that I just created? You should go contact this person. Yeah, I know. I was fascinated by that. But you say something that I want to hang on one word, which I find interesting: trust.
Yes.
I think human nature it's hard to trust. And so much of it with David and I, when we discuss with clients, how do I trust? Like, it seems like to me that's a very long, even if you put the controls in place and everything else, it's still going to take a very long period of time before humans trust AI and what it's capable of doing. And is there an easier way to get there?
Yeah, and I think that you trust agents kind of the way you build trust with humans. So you have that intern, right? And the intern, you say, okay, go do this job. And you give the intern the access the intern needs to do that job. And you see what they go and do. And if they go and do rational things, you say, okay, I'll let you keep doing that. And maybe I'll ask you to do this job. Right. And you sort of, you ease into it. And over time, if they continue doing that, maybe they are no longer an intern, they become an employee, right? And you actually give them autonomy at that point. And if you take that model with agents, you can do the same thing. You can say, okay, we're going to basically not actually let you do all the things yet, but we're going to tell you to go do the job and watch the MCP calls you make and see, are you doing things or trying to do things that are consistent with the job that you've been given? And if the answer is yes, then great. And then you take it a step further. You say, okay, we're going to have bunches and bunches and bunches of these agents. They're going to be purpose-built to do a specific thing. And each one of them, in the context of the thing they're doing, for the human they're doing it, for that task, should have guardrails that basically are sufficiently narrow that you can trust that even if it tries to go off the rails, it won't be able to. So that you basically, you get to a point where each agent is managed down within where it has to be. And as long as you can trust that those guardrails are going to hold, if the agent tries to do stupid stuff, it's not going to happen.
Right. Isn't there a point, though, when you have agents interoperating with other agents, the level of complexity gets so high so fast? It's virtually impossible to control what they can do.
Well, it will get there. So today, those use cases are pretty rare, right?
Yes.
But
yes.
a year from now, they're not going to be.
No, exactly.
And so the way I see it is today, like our platform, today we have a very lovely user interface for human administrators to manage it.
Right, which I've seen that, yes.
A year from now, many of our customers will probably no longer be able to use that because they will have too many agents running, and it will just be, they will have to have either deterministic or even AI management of that in order to be able to really keep track of what else going on.
That's a little bit mind-blowing, but very interesting too, right? That it
I think our user interface is probably time limited.
Right.
No, I think I agree. It's funny, I hadn't thought about it that way, but I actually agree with you, because I think the complexity is going to grow exponentially.
Well, but that's
very
also
quickly.
That's also how you build trust.
Right.
You have to, this concept that you're going to have the one AI to rule them all, or the AI, the agent that runs the agents. At a certain point, the level of complexity of that is so large that we're going to get there by much narrower things. In the same way that, when I got my first iPhone, there was a screen that was mostly empty.
Right.
And now I've got pages and pages and pages of apps, right? So, at a certain point, you get to these very narrowly cast things that are really, really good at something, and companies will want to deploy those.
Right. So it's also interesting because, as you say that, like, I think about Steve Jobs and the iPhone and that evolution, and there's conflicting stories about whether he ever would have agreed to a full app store or whether it's gone beyond his original vision. But the point that stays is he knew that it would take a while for people to get to the point where they were ready to deal with these apps. And so I think the other part of it, I'm curious, like, do you think that there's also a growth curve in the people who are creating and managing these agents where, something Peter and I talk about a lot is you've got people who do a job today and you're going to give them agents, and sometimes what they might lack is the ability to be a good manager, to be a good supervisor of these interns.
Sure.
How much?
But also, there's it goes a step further than that. That the person who is your mid-level person in finance, they're not necessarily wired to be the person who understands how to tell computers to do a job, right? So the concept of I'm going to deploy agents, and if I build it, they will come. That's where you see all these, 80% of AI projects fail thing. It's like, I put it out there and no one did anything. Well, that's not what they do. If they did, they all would have been building, low code, no code things. We'd have no coders at this point. So it really is going to take that innovation is going to come from a couple places. Better use of these tools by people who already spend their time solving business problems with computers. So, consultants, folks like that, right? Mm-hmm. And then you'll have folks in your team that you probably don't know who they are yet, but they're really good at figuring this stuff out. And I see that all the time with people who I don't necessarily expect, who are using Chat or Gemini or something to do really, really cool stuff. I'm like, that person gets it.
Right.
We always joke that there's like this hidden, undefined, unnamed set of skills out there that we're just now figuring out what they are, that people who are just really good at seeing a problem and figuring out how to deploy tools to solve that problem.
And they're good at communicating it. Part of what you do with these is you see a problem and you explain it in a way that an AI can go solve it. And what you say, that's being a manager, right? Because right now I do it by saying to an employee, go do this.
Right.
And then I can say instead to an AI to go do it. So people who can see a problem, describe it, tell the story about it, explain the context, and then send intern AI person on their merry way to go do it.
Right.
I also like the idea of giving that AI agent just progressively more independence, I guess you might say, or more latitude to operate.
Absolutely.
Going back to what you were saying there earlier about sort of the earlier approach of role-based access controls, should an agent always be bound by maybe the way I think of it is like two laws. One law is how much latitude you've given that agent as it's demonstrated its trustworthiness. And then the other is maybe inherited by the person
entirely. And that's exactly how our platform works. So we interface with whatever IAM you're running. So we bring the role and the human's authority as the base, and then we allow you to further limit that based on the specific rules around the agent. And it's more than just the agent and the person.
Right.
It's what tool are they accessing? What data within that are they trying to do? What steps are they taking with it? So there's a sort of a multi-dimensional
Right.
access control issue that really ultimately comes down to context.
Really interesting. And then I think the other part of it, if I understood correctly, you talked about sort of that audit trail and monitoring what happened is like, you can set up all the guardrails you want, but you want to also be able to say what actually happened, what did it attempt to do.
Yeah.
So is there some aspect of like monitoring this?
Oh, all that. So we monitor it all. It all comes out open telemetry, so you can take it into whatever system you use for looking at logs. But the monitoring is important too. So all of this exists not to keep people from doing things, but to encourage them to. Right? You have guardrails and you have trust, so people are willing to give this a try. And then if you're monitoring it, you can see where in your organization who's actually using this stuff.
Right.
If there's this person over in marketing who has figured something out, and you see that she's got all kinds of things happening with MCP, go find her and say, hey, what are you doing? And let's bring that to the rest of the organization, because clearly you figured something out.
So it's really interesting, because I think that aspect of making people feel safe experimenting is really, really powerful.
And you have to make them feel safe failing.
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
Agreed.
You have to be able to fail in a way that's not catastrophic.
Right.
Story time. When I was 7th or 8th grade, I was hired by the school district to teach a course of computer science entry-level computer course. A local company had donated some used mini computer equipment to my high school in rural Pennsylvania, and I taught 2 cohorts. One was my peers, and I wasn't the official teacher. The math teacher was in the room, but I was teaching them.
Right.
And then I was also hired to teach an adult evening education course.
Yeah.
The difference was remarkable.
Yeah.
The students just hopped on these VT100 terminals and pounded away, and they just tried stuff. The adults were terrified they were going to break something.
Right.
And it was an inhibitor.
Oh, yeah.
And so like what's always stuck with me, and I see it now when you talk about like that person from marketing trying something, is there's this inherent fear of, as you said, of failing, of doing something wrong, of breaking something.
Yep.
So maybe if you can give people some confidence that we've got enough controls around what this agent is doing, you can say, look, just try it, experiment. You're not going to break anything because we've got you covered.
Yeah, exactly.
But isn't that a cultural shift for most organizations to do that? Because especially once you get outside of technology, most individuals are not of that mindset.
Right.
There's a very big difference between taking a marketing person and being, innovative with a tool.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard. And that's going to take, I think, a long time to get to that point where you have, AI deeply embedded in an organization solving the really hard business problems rather than just around the periphery that I think most people are doing today.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gratified by seeing some very household name 100-year-old companies that we're talking to that really are pushing the envelope here and trying to, at least. So you're definitely seeing it, but you also certainly newer technology companies often are faster to adopt, certainly.
Yeah, I almost correlate it back to the days of just when analytics started making a big, into the world, and most companies didn't embrace it very readily. It took them a long time, and I find that those companies that did will embrace this a lot faster than older traditional companies that are a lot more reluctant or just not innovative or very risk averse. Even if you put all the controls around it, they're still very risk averse, which I find shocking.
Yeah, no, it's. You read about things that could possibly go wrong, and you don't want to get in trouble for them.
Right. You read about the Google guy.
You read about the Google guy, right?
Drive.
Lost drive. And if you're in a company where people can get in trouble for things, culturally, that's going to be a problem.
Yes.
If you're in a company where people don't get in trouble for things like that, and where people are celebrated for failing in this sort of thing, then that's what you're going to get.
Right.
Yes. Agreed.
So you hit on something earlier too. You mentioned the reports about 95% of AI projects failing or not reaching their stated objectives. And it's something we've talked a lot about. And I'm curious, like what you see happening next. Like a lot of what has happened has been, as you said, it's been companies, giving access to an AI-powered chat tool to a large number of employees, and then they're hands off and they say, okay, let the magic happen now.
Right.
And they sit back and 3 months later, they're like, where's my productivity increase I thought I was going to get?
Exactly.
How are you seeing that start to change? Are you seeing
because those POCs are now ending. And yet there is still pressure from investors, CEO, whoever, to get some productivity from AI. So the question is, what's next? And the current thing that's what's next is, well, let's do agents. People don't yet necessarily understand what that means, right? But there's certainly talk about it, and I think that what happens, we're pattern matchers, that we have to really get out there and surface successful implementations of this stuff where people can not necessarily mimic it exactly, but see in this a variation on the theme they have.
100%.
And that's how all of this happens.
I think that what we're missing as an industry is a lot of very, very demonstrable, recognizable success stories that people can go, oh, I have something a little bit like that I can
Exactly. And that's been always how we how we bring new technology.
I mean, that's what we went through with early AI 7-8 years ago. Is you would show people examples of prediction algorithms, of classification algorithms in situ in a business case, and people go, oh, well, if you could do that, I've got this accounting spreadsheet over here. I wonder if I could do the same thing.
Absolutely.
That's how the ball got rolling.
Absolutely. And many other, desktop publishing and many things where, you see, you imitate, you innovate.
Right. I like that. It is that imitation that is what's lacking. So do you think in, 2025 was in the press, was the year of Agentic. It was everywhere and
nowhere.
Yes.
And nowhere. Right. And it was when, Salesforce said, maybe everybody's not using this as much as we thought. But a lot of it also is that you have to, these very large technology companies all had to say, we're agentic now. And we are going to be the one AI to rule them all. But the thing that they suffer from is no one only uses one tool to do their job, right? If you have a job where all you ever use is Salesforce, Agentforce might be all you need.
Yeah, right. Agree.
The only person who has that job is the Salesforce administrator, right? The rest of us use lots of different things. And the whole point of this agentic thing is not to only interact with one platform, but to interact across them where you have data and services that cross many different places and use those together. Absolutely. And that is where the magic happens.
Absolutely. And I think that's worth repeating. The whole value of an agent is that it is platform and application agnostic.
Yes.
It can discover and use tools provided by different applications, different
as we do as humans.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And that's where it becomes mimicking humans, becomes like an enthusiastic intern.
Right.
So who do you have to sell to then when you're
it's funny. We have to sell to a bunch of people. There is always a security person, a CISO type of person.
Right.
It's an interesting role because traditionally security, what I call security with a capital S, is bad people outside trying to break in and do nasty stuff.
Right.
And that's sort of the CISO's.
Yep. It's all about perimeter defense.
All that kind of stuff. And there's many, many acronyms.
Right.
That is important, and there is that here, but that is very different than internal person doing something they're allowed to do with a tool they're allowed to do it with, and bad stuff happens, right? And that's not a realm the CISOs lived in before, and yet that is a big part of what we have to be able to do. And further, the CISO is not expert on all the different systems the company uses. CISO doesn't know what Salesforce things this person should or should not be able to do.
Absolutely.
Right. So we're generally, our first line in is there is someone in the company where the CEO came to them and said, you make AI happen, and I want to see results. And here's some money. Right. And those people then generally have, across the organization, they'll have some security people, they'll have some IT people, they'll have some line of business people, and they're sort of pulling together that, and we have to sort of get in there and say, okay, if you want to be successful, there's this thing you're going to need, and let's show it to you, and we show it to them, and then they go, oh yeah, I can see why I'm going to need that, right, and sort of that's the path in.
It's really interesting to your point about like the CISO and their point of view. And, of course they could expand their mission a little bit, but like you've got all these other functions that have a piece of that puzzle too. In a lot of organizations, you've got a chief data officer, you've got people doing records management who understand the classification of different types of data, maybe at a finer grain than the CISO does.
Right.
You've got a chief privacy officer in some organizations. You've got all,
and then there's multiples. I met yesterday with the Fortune 50 company chief data and AI officer.
Right. That's the new
and that's a new one. And
that's the new title. Yep.
So it's all over the place.
Really interesting.
Yeah, there is no set way to do this yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't seen a set managerial structure that actually works across.
I mean, I've
That's
worked
all
with
over the
one
place.
company where the CEO has a pal who was retired, and he said, come in and make AI happen in this Fortune 100 company.
Yeah.
And he's just like across the organization figuring it out, and just came out of retirement to do it.
Now, do you see most organizations putting AI in the IT division?
Mostly,
Yes.
at this point, I would say it's somewhere there. And it's because, it's funny, back in the API days, we were not selling to IT.
Right.
We were selling to the person who had to, at Marriott, who had to make hotel rooms appear on the mobile app.
Right.
That was our customer. They would walk us through IT.
Right.
But it was not coming out of IT's budget, and IT was very grumpy that it existed, but this mandate was coming from on high.
Right.
One of the challenges is that many IT organizations are sort of service providers, but they're not.
Right.
They're playing. They're not building.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so you want to find the IT folks who actually recognize that this is their opportunity to fundamentally change and help their company, as opposed to their opportunity
I
to
agree.
sort of make sure bad things don't happen.
That's a really good way to put it, because I think a lot of IT teams are playing defense in a number of different ways. They're
Absolutely.
preventing
Right.
bad things from happening.
Yep.
And they're also, to be honest, sometimes they're defending existing IT budgets and headcount levels and all
Oh
the
yeah,
other things.
yeah, and absolutely, in the same way that happened when the cloud came in, right? So,
Yeah.
I remember I was on the cloud panel at Interop, which was
Yep.
for the rest of you out there, this conference where they would have data center stuff
Right.
everywhere, right? In Vegas, huge conference. It's probably gone now. And the cloud panel was like in a back room. No one was really talking about it. And these guys were in the audience saying, well, we will never allow that. I've got to have it all by control. And I'm like, look, you're here in Vegas at Interop. Your CFO is at a much better conference in Hawaii. And what she found out is that she can have all of your stuff with no CapEx.
Right.
How do you
Right.
think that's going to go?
Right.
Right. And inevitably that's what happened.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
And I think this is the same thing. Once again, IT needs to recognize there is an opportunity for them to fundamentally improve their company if they figure out how to take advantage of this magic seat at the table that they've been given.
I agree with you 110%. I think you're absolutely right. I think we've spoken about that many, many times. And look, both of us coming from IT organizations generally see them as more of an impediment. And I hate to say that,
Yeah.
but they are not innovative at all. They become big service providers and they're very contentious with the business.
Yep.
And I think
Yep.
when I started out, look, I sat on trading desks for a very long time. I was deeply intimate with the business. In many cases, we knew the business better than the actual business people
Sure.
because we had to make it work end to end.
And you saw everything.
And we saw things that they didn't see. We understood how to optimize and do all this stuff. But since they're so separated out today, you don't see that anymore.
Right. And this is an opportunity. So AI is coming in. MCP is coming in. It's probably already there.
Right.
Right. You can either say to people, I'm going to stand in the way of you doing your job, and I'm going to pretend that this is not happening and wait till bad things happen. Or you can say, I'm going to put this thing in place so that magic can happen, and we're going to actually
Right.
give you a path
Right.
to make this happen.
I
And
agree.
technology will come in. It can come through the back door, the front door, but
It's coming in no matter what. It's
Yeah.
going to happen no
Yeah.
matter what. And I just feel for so many organizations, fear is such a big motivator.
yeah,
And risk is such a big motivator.
Absolutely.
And IT is always fear and risk, fear and risk,
Yep.
fear and risk. And innovation rarely plays into that conversation for most organizations.
yeah. But
Like,
fortunately, there
there are some.
and those are the ones we're talking to.
And it's funny because I read a report, a Harvard Business Review report recently, and I was talking to you about it. And it really comes down to, I think it's roughly 8% of the organizations that are generally set up internally to have that innovative mindset where fear is not driving things and where you can embrace new technologies like this and maximize their potential. But most are built around risk and fear.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes down to also to a fundamental decision that IT has a chance to re-adjudicate right now. Which
absolutely.
Is, do we want to regulate or facilitate?
Yes.
And
But they also need a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And they're generally buried a couple of levels down.
which puts them in defensive mode, which leads them to be on the regulation side, not the facilitation side. Like
Absolutely.
It's a complex problem.
Absolutely.
I would advocate CDAI, is what do you want to call them these days, report up to the C level. I mean, the CEO level.
Yeah.
To make all this happen much more efficiently.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with that. So 2026.
Yes.
what do you see happening? Like, is agentic still the buzzword in
I think
2026?
so. I think so because I think we've gotten a lot of value out of chat interfaces and out of um, non-agentic world. We now have little apps inside of these chat interfaces, right? So you can sort of have a little window, and it reminds me of Flash.
Oh,
right?
God, yeah.
So back then you had web browsers that were all text.
I haven't heard that term in a
And
long
then
time.
Flash came and let you
Yeah.
do interactive stuff. And there was that little period of time where that was the way that you did this stuff.
Yeah.
And then we evolved past that. So we're in the Flash era of ChatGPT and all these other chat interfaces,
I
right?
love that.
I'm ready to leave that era then.
Yes, you are because the concept of a little iframe like window inside being the way you do stuff.
Right.
That is a kludge if ever there was one.
Yes,
Right?
100%. Absolutely.
So I think we will play with that this year.
Yep.
This coming year, right? And we will start seeing those apps be able to do certain things. We will start seeing Gemini's amazing new model and the sort of the sidecar with it and everything that you see going on there. People will start figuring out what that can do.
Right.
And the demand will be, I don't want to be told what to do. I just want you to go do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so to me, if we have the kind of, we continue the trajectory and the speed that we're on right now, when we're sitting here in December of 2026, we will hopefully have seen a fairly significant change and move in that direction.
Right.
I certainly, I hope you're right.
Right.
I think you're right.
I think so.
think we're going to head that direction. And I think it can't come fast enough.
Yeah,
I think that,
I agree.
You're right. It's the AI window or the AI icon that exists in every application today is just really a kludge. And
It's silly.
we look at
Yeah,
all
it is.
the AI powered browsers out there today, right?
Yeah.
And they're all just a little panel off to the side.
Yep.
And they now involve computer use, which
Yes.
is actually terrifying because it is this binary choice. Do you want this thing to not take any action and always ask you? Or do you want to turn off the protection and just let it go crazy?
Right.
And it's lacking the sort
Yeah.
of guardrails that you
Absolutely.
described as
Absolutely.
what agents really need.
Absolutely.
So the sooner we move past that and get to actual agents
Yeah.
that are real agents with
Yep.
the right degree of controls, I think
Absolutely.
Better.
that'll be good.
Absolutely.
The
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
I don't think we're too far away.
As we get towards wrapping up, so first of all, I would love to see if we can get together in December next
Let's
year
do it.
and see
I'm there.
whether our predictions are coming true.
Yes.
I also want to talk about a few of the other things that you're involved in because I
Okay.
think they're super interesting. You mentioned in your intro that you are also doing some Broadway production work
Yep.
and things like that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there's a group of folks in the tech world who also love to do theater, and there's about a dozen or so of us who have our fingers in various Broadway things. We all know each other, and it's fun. It's I've been able to bring folks who are theater lovers and have the resources to invest in Broadway to be part of it and to be in rehearsals and be in go to the openings and meet the folks and so I was involved with the George Clooney show, Good Night and Good Luck.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
And Romeo and Juliet with Rachel Zegler and Kit Connor, and these were just really great experiences. I'm currently on Broadway with Queen of Versailles, which unfortunately is closing, but I think it's a great show. And working longer term on a musical version of Silver Linings Playbook.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Very
that's currently in development.
And it's interesting because I think Peter would probably agree with me. I don't see any surprise in the fact that you are involved in AI and technology and in
Yeah.
theater and arts because to me,
Oh,
music, art, theater, and technology all
they go hand in hand.
they're very
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah.
This might be a sacrilegious question, but do you see any near-term opportunities in the next year or two for AI to, in a healthy way, to get to involved to be assisting in live theater?
I hope so. The great thing about live theater, and I think one of the things that we love about it is human,
Right.
right? But AI, the great designers are using AI to help them design.
Right.
The great writers are using AI to help them do research and to do the concept of how AI doesn't have to create art. AI can make creators
better.
a lot better at what they're doing,
Right.
Yes.
and a lot faster, and help them create things they couldn't do before. Back when computer-aided design came out, people were like, "Oh my God, it's not drafting anymore. It's not the same." And you had Frank Gehry, who basically said, "I couldn't design the buildings I'm designing if that didn't exist."
Right.
Right.
Right. And so we're going to see some amazing art and some amazing creativity that comes from humans being able to use these tools as tools to help them come up with stuff that we haven't even thought about yet.
I love the idea too that AI can help humans create better art.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we need is more transparency when people are using AI to get
Absolutely.
away from that stigma of AI is cheating, right?
Yeah.
Because we see that all the time.
Sure.
Oh, like, you can't use AI, that would be cheating. But used in the right way, it actually stimulates creativity.
Sure. I mean, remember when ChatGPT was first getting popular, there was this move to, if you used chat in your article you wrote, you were
Yes,
supposed to credit it.
disclose that. Yes.
Right.
That lasted about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And now it's
Now everything's
not
on
a
there.
thing
It's all
anymore, right? And yet we also can pretty easily read something and say, that was written by AI.
Yeah.
right.
Right. And ultimately it doesn't matter. Right. If you are able to, again, it goes back to if you buy a Jeff Koons sculpture, Jeff didn't make it, right?
Right.
He has a studio of people, right?
Right.
So if you are able to, as an artist, tell your story, describe it, and have your studio make it, or tell it
Right.
and describe it and have your studio make it with AI as part of the team, is still art.
It's still art.
Yeah.
Doesn't take away from it.
Yeah.
Really neat.
Yeah. Interesting.
You want to tell us a little bit about the League of Live Stream Theater, which I also
Sure.
think is interesting.
No, this came up started during the pandemic, and as theater was coming back, live theater was coming back, and I was on the board of a nonprofit theater here in New York called Second Stage at the time, and there was this period where a lot of people still were not willing to go into a theater,
Mhm.
and doing theater was really, really tough, and budgets, there was just you didn't have full theater, so you needed to get your money somewhere else, right?
Right.
And so we started a nonprofit, a partner of mine and I started it, to bring Broadway, off-Broadway, and regional theater to folks who couldn't be in the seat and generate more revenue for the theaters. There had been some attempts to do this as a for-profit, and it just didn't seem to us that you could venture fund a company selling nonprofit theater and actually make money for your investors.
Right.
So we were fortunate that we had a couple of very wonderful benefactors who funded this. Bloomberg was one, and the Cheryl Family Foundation, and a few others that basically said, we want to help theaters recover from the pandemic. And so
Interesting.
we began doing that. Started it in, I think, 2021, and did a few Broadway shows, did a few off-Broadway shows. And now what we're finding is that there is still a demand for this. It's interesting. You have like these star-driven shows.
Right.
And if you're a television or movie star, you don't necessarily want your theatrical performance where you might have forgotten your lines. You don't want it out there forever.
Right.
Right.
But you do want someone, you want people to be able to see it and have it go away while it's exciting right then.
Right.
So by having it be live, or what we call as live, we'll do it maybe the week after the show closes, and then it goes away. And so there's no fear that this is going to be out there, that it's cannibalizing something else, whatever. It's just,
Right.
you have someone who's doing a one-woman show on Broadway for, let's say, 12 weeks. If you don't travel to New York during those 12 weeks, you're not going to see it.
Right.
Right.
We
Right.
want to make it so that you can see that.
Interesting. That's
And
fascinating.
then bring that new revenue stream to a very, very difficult economic climate doing Broadway and off-Broadway theater.
Right.
Wow. Interesting.
Excellent.
Understood.
I know Broadway continues to be challenging, even
It
though
is.
the
It
numbers
is.
are up, as I understand.
The grosses are up, but so are the costs. Alas, yes, it does get more and more expensive to do these things. It's very tough. They had, I think, 13 new musicals last season, and I think maybe one recouped.
Wow.
So maybe two. So one more may recoup. We'll see. But musicals are really, really, really expensive, and they're tough. It's because of the expense, you don't quite get as much time to make sure it's perfect before it gets out there, and it's hard to do.
Interesting.
Oh, interesting.
It sounds like I love the mission of the
Yeah.
League of Livestream Theater.
Thank you.
And yeah, listen, it has been a fascinating discussion.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Likewise.
telling us about BarnDoor and
My pleasure.
sharing sort of your observations on the market with us.
Yeah, no, thank you. This has been a great discussion. I can't thank
enjoyed
you
it,
enough
sure.
for you taking the time to come down here to the studio and
It's
have this
lovely to be here.
conversation with us.
Lovely to be here. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
thank you.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can do this again in the
We'll
future.
look forward to
We'll do
having
this
a
next December.
yeah, we'll see
Yes.
what we've
Absolutely.
learned in a year.
Absolutely. We're
Excellent.
in.
Good.
All right. Take
Thank
care.
you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Call Me Data, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching Call Me Data. If you enjoyed our podcast, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to us on YouTube, and make sure to stay up to date with us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.